We're talking Baltimore Ravens on the Our Lads Football Network, Our Lads Football YouTube channel. And whenever we talk about the Baltimore Ravens, this man joins us, Tony Lombardi, Russell Street Report. How's it going, Tony?
Everything's good, Greg. How about with you?
Doing good. I think we both have a razor issue, but that's a discussion for another day. Like we care, right?
Okay.
So it's Wednesday. Cut us a break. Okay. So anyway, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, huge matchup coming up. We're going to get into that. Matter of fact, I had an opportunity to talk to Alex Kozora, who does a great job covering the Steelers for Steelers Depot. That interview is already on the channel. Tony's, of course, obviously is now on the channel as well. And you're going to be able to watch both perspectives, and I think that's pretty cool. We'll get handicappers' perspectives a little bit later on, too, on my Proline TV channel. So a lot of Pittsburgh, Baltimore talk this week, and deservedly so. Before we get into that, Tony, though, I want to talk about the team itself, and because we haven't talked for a while. So a lot's gone on this season for Baltimore. Let's I tell you what, let's dive in first of all to you have something in the oven, Tony, or is that me?
No, this is an annoying thing that happens when I get text messages on my MacBook.
Oh, okay.
Things.
All right, good.
Sorry about that.
We don't want anything burning. All right, so let's talk. Let's talk about the. Tell you what, let's talk. We don't need to spend a lot of time on Lamar Jackson because we all know how awesome he is, and the big deal about Lamar is going to come playoff time. So let's talk about the wide receivers, specifically two of them. Rashad Bateman. Interesting that we start off. Who would have thought that we'd be starting at Baltimore? I've been talking to you in months, and we're starting a conversation with Rashad Bateman, but hey, he deserves it. So I guess the question is, do you think this is a coincidence because this is a contract year for him, right?
No, he just re-upped for a 3-year extension earlier this year. You know, they were debating that 5th-year option with him because they had it with Odafe as well, and they ended up landing on a 3-year deal with him. And it's a team-friendly deal, and I think it was an opportunity for Rashad to prove himself and feel comfortable in where he is and not have to worry about that 5th-year option being exercised or becoming a free agent. Because, you know, personally, I think he's got a lot on his plate. You know, I've been told that he's a guy that really is dependent upon by his family, extended family, for financial support. So, you know, when you have that on the weight on your shoulders like that and some other things I think he's dealt with from an injury standpoint, he's really come a long way in 2024.
Well, that's great news for the Ravens then, obviously, because he is playing his best football. And so, yeah, you get those injuries behind you and money issues behind you. And I guess it's not a surprise that he's playing as well as he is. So how much of a difference then can he make along with Zay Flowers and the tight ends and the running game to give Lamar Jackson maybe the most balance that he's ever had?
Yeah, the Ravens can beat you in a number of ways. And I think earlier in the season when they had maybe that 7-game winning streak or something to that nature, when they were on a roll offensively and became the number 1 ranked offense in the league, they just beat you in a number of ways. And it's basically whatever the defense was going to do, they had an answer for it. You know, whether they were going to try to stop Derrick Henry, they could throw the football. If they were trying to spread the field on the back end with a lot of zone coverages and mixed coverages, they could beat you with the running game. So, and you didn't mention one other guy, too, who's been a spectacular addition to the offense, and the way Todd Monken has employed him is Justice Hill. He's done a great job as a third down back. He does everything that team asks for him. He's a great receiver out of the backfield, can get you 4 or 5 yards on third down if you need it on the ground. Just a really solid player. But they've got a number of weapons that they can use and throw at a team. But as you alluded to when talking about Lamar, they've got to do it during the playoffs, and they haven't been able to do that. And one of the issues I think that they run into, Greg, and I think it was on full display during that December 1st game against the Philadelphia Eagles, when that defensive line of the Eagles just annihilated the Ravens' offensive front. And when you have defensive tackles that can penetrate that backfield and do what they did against the Ravens and only have to rush 4 players and then it's 7 guys in the back, that's a difficult thing for the Ravens to answer, and they had trouble with that against the Eagles.
And that problem just isn't going to go away this season. I mean, this is what it is. It's just a matter of some of the younger players hopefully getting better, because there is a lot of youth, especially on the right side of that offensive line.
Yeah, there is. And the skill position players are not an issue. They have plenty of weapons to throw at you, and they've done a great job mixing it up with that. And Lamar's developed that confidence and rapport with Rashad Bateman that did not exist in 2023. So all those are good things. But one of the issues coming into the season is still an issue, and that is that offensive line, particularly the two guards. Patrick McCarry is a guy who has been a great swing position player for the Ravens. He could play any position across the offensive front. But now that he's the starting guard and has been so for a while, I think he's being exposed, and that's an issue. And then at the right guard, you've got Daniel Falele, and he's this big lumbering guy who has trouble getting to the second level, looks a little clumsy. When he engages you, he's really good. But if you can avoid him, and a lot of people have done that, it spells problems for the Ravens. And if it wasn't for Lamar and with his mobility in that the offensive backfield, I can't imagine how many times he'd be sacked so far this season.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We talk about that with the great quarterbacks. In the old days, we talk about like the Peyton Mannings and the Tom Brady's because of their quick release or those types of guys. But same thing happens, more obviously, with the athletic quarterbacks and how they can get out of the pocket. So you put a different quarterback in there, and all of a sudden, those offensive pro football focus, how good you are in pass protection numbers drop. It's like, well, wait a second. I thought these guys were good offensive linemen. They're okay, but it's the quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but sometimes I see those grades from PFF, and I'm thinking, I don't think they watch the same game that I watch.
I know. I always tell people it's a nice tool to have, and they have, it helps you along with some information, but that's all it is. It's just a little bit of a tool. So don't look at it religiously.
Right.
Okay.
It's not the end all be all.
No, it is not. Okay. So as far as the defense is concerned, because this is a big story, the Ravens have had one of the best defenses in football for a while. But one of the things that I thought about earlier this year, and I kind of touched up on it, and I thought, we'll see if this is going to be an issue, is sooner or later when you keep, and I think we're seeing it in San Francisco a little bit too, sooner or later when you keep having to replace your coordinator, one after another, to me, that could be an issue. Now, again, I don't know if that is a big issue with the Ravens. That could just be an excuse. But you do have a coordinator that didn't have a lot of experience. It's just playing football a few years ago. And then, of course, we can get into the players as well. But has that been an effect at all? Has there been any sort of scheme changes? Has there been a growing pains deal with having another new young coordinator?
Well, I think early in the year where the Ravens struggled, I call it their soft white underbelly, and that is in the middle of the field. Teams were just dissecting them on short and intermediate passes, and even sometimes down the middle deep. Marcus Williams was a real liability.
Oh, wow.
That signing has turned out to be, a real, bomb in terms of what they're getting for their money that they're spending for that guy. So they replaced him with Kyle Hamilton. Now the issue there is that Kyle Hamilton's such a unicorn on defense. He can do so many different things. And I think because now he's patrolling the middle of the field primarily, but he does move around a little bit, but primarily he's patrolling the middle of the field. And I think that limits what he can do in other aspects of the game. So I think you weaken yourself a little bit there, but replacing Marcus Williams was a big bonus.
Okay.
And Eddie Jackson was not good at all back there. They parted ways with him and put Ardarius Washington back there. Now Ardarius is a player who really makes plays all the time. He's just small, and injuries have been the thing that have set him back in the past. It's, when you show up there at training camp and watch him play, he's a feisty competitor. He battles all the time, and he's always around the ball, but he always ended up getting hurt. Knock on wood, he hasn't been hurt this year. He's been healthy, and he's played really, really well. So I think moving those two guys to the middle and then flip-flopping with the linebacker, the weak side linebacker beside Roquan Smith, that being either Chris Board or Malik Harrison, sometimes Trenton Simpson, depending upon the down and distance situation. They've done a nice job with that. So it stabilizes things over the last, I think, 4 games.
Okay.
That defense has been among the league's best in terms of yards and points. So you got to give them props for that. Now, I know they played the Giants recently, so I'm going to just throw that one off the board. The 3 games prior to that, they were, I think, the best defense in the league because they basically said, we're going to keep all the plays in front of us from now on. We're going to tighten up the middle of the field. And so far, they've done an effective job of that.
Do they still need to, because they did a really good job, it looks like, adding Nate Wiggins in the draft. And he looks like, any rookie that's corner is going to struggle. But, Wiggins is, at least from what I've seen, has done his part as a rookie. Do you think they have to add on top of that, not just the defensive backfield, but maybe even someone on the opposite side? Does Brandon Stevenson Brandon Stevens, does he need to be either replaced or given even more competition? I know they brought in Tre'Davious White. I don't know if that's exactly worked out. So what about that other spot?
It's a problem right now. And Brandon had a terrific 2023 season. So I think the Ravens probably thought, well, he's just going to build upon that. He's in a contract year. He's going to ball out because he's in a contract year. We'll see where the chips lie. And there were a lot of people earlier in the season saying they ought to re-ink him now. They ought to extend him now and maybe save a little bit of money before he hits free agency. Now they're probably already thinking, I'm glad we didn't do that. Big sigh of relief. So maybe they knew something that we didn't. But Brandon is a guy who's got terrific change of direction skills. He's got very fluid hips, which allows him to mirror receivers. He almost always seems to be around the ball. His ball skills are just horrible. He never turns, I shouldn't say never, rarely turns to look for the football, doesn't know where it is, puts his hands up. A lot of times because he doesn't know where the ball is, he'll run into a receiver, rake down their arms. He had 2 defensive pass interference penalties against the Giants. And then, players that can make those contested catches, he's susceptible to that back shoulder throw. Even though he's right there, he's susceptible to that throw. And I think right now the rest of the league is going to go after him until he proves otherwise.
And White, look, I thought it was interesting when they made the deal for White because all of a sudden you kind of heard people who I just don't think they pay as much attention as we do. Because a player like White, what they can do is they can get off to great starts to their careers, and then that can kind of hang around the minds of fans for a long time. And I think that's what's happened with White. He got off to such a great start, was a really good college player. I loved him. I thought he was going to be a great player, and then injuries happened. And I don't know if he's ever been close to being that same player. So now he's on his 3rd team in whatever a year. So has he looked any better with the Ravens? Does it look like it's been a fit in any way?
I think if he was that player anymore, Brandon Stevens would be sitting on the bench and playing special teams. And that's just, Tre'Davious is, I think he's pretty decent still when they're in zone coverage. When he's asked to travel with a man across the field or stick with a man and he's got to go cover deep, I don't think he's that kind of player. And so I think they want to pick their spots with him.
Okay.
I know that Brandon Stevens, I think he had the most snaps last game against the Giants than any other of their corners. But that could change because Brandon, if he, it's like almost like Justin Tucker in a way with him kicking field goals. He's got the yips. And I think that Brandon Stevens, his confidence is really down right now. So it's like if something's going to go wrong, it will go wrong because that's kind of the mojo and that's sort of the lack of swag that he's got playing that position. And as we know, you need a lot of swagger to be an effective corner in the NFL.
Yeah, we'll get to the Mr. Yip in a couple of minutes. But before we do that, let's go through the rest of this defense, the front 7. You talked about the linebackers. Have they really missed Patrick Queen or have they just missed him a little bit?
I think they've missed him. I think they probably underestimated how much they would miss him. Because the conventional thinking was that Trenton Simpson had similar skill sets, but he's not performing well. He looks lost at times out there. When he has to make a play on the ball and he knows he's got to go and hit somebody and just tackle the ball carrier, he does a pretty good job. But he just gets lost up in pre-snap movements, seem to confuse him a little bit. So, yeah, they've missed Queen. And I think one thing that Queen did very well, and he's doing it for the Steelers, is that he blitzes well from the middle linebacker spot. Okay. And he's really quick to the ball. And I think when the Ravens did that, even if he didn't get home against the opponent's quarterback, he had to be accounted for. And when they had to account for him, whether it was faking a blitz or actually blitzing, I think that helped Justin Madubuike. And you see that he's not having the kind of year that he had in
Yeah.
2023. So, you take away Queen, take away, the other edge guys that they had, and they're no longer here. I think that's kind of allowed the opponents to spend a little bit more attention or direct a little bit more attention towards Madubuike.
Yeah, and then of course when you had Madubuike and Queen and Hamilton playing a position and a role that was much more suited to him, that's a completely different defense that we're seeing this season for the Ravens. So that makes a lot of sense. But one player who has stepped up his game, and you thought that was definitely possible, was Travis Jones.
Oh yeah, he's been suffering with an ankle injury a good part of the season.
Okay.
But I think that the rest during the bye week helped him a lot because he was still in the game when it was already, it was done. It was in the fourth quarter, 35-7, I think, at one point, and he was still out there playing. So he obviously feels a whole lot better, and he commands a lot of attention. He can break through double teams, and I think him at 100%, you'll see a better Madubuike next to him because of that.
Okay. The pass rushing has come from Kyle Van Noy and Owe on the opposite side. They still haven't been able to get much, it looks like, out of Ajabo. So how is the pass rush? Is the pass rush need to be better?
I think it does. I don't think that they have that one guy that you have to account for. Not many teams have a Myles Garrett or a TJ Watt, but they don't have anything closely resembling that. Owe has been pretty good. He's been not as good, I don't think, this year against the run as he has been in years past. And that's why you see Tavius Robinson getting a lot of snaps out there on the edge, because he is much better against the run than Odafe is.
Okay.
But, not that he's bad, but I don't think he's having as good a season as he had in 2023. He is getting after the quarterback a little bit better. I think he has 8 sacks. You mentioned Kyle Van Noy. I think he also has 8 sacks. And I think the Ravens as a team are maybe second or third in the league in sacks. So, but they just don't have that one guy that can, wreak havoc in the backfield of the opponent and has to command that attention. And I think even Jadeveon Clowney, a lot of times last year, I think he had 9.5 sacks. He was so busy and active that he did command a lot of attention. And in doing so, I think it helped the other guys with their sack totals.
So this is something normally that, and we will talk about this when the offseason officially starts for the Ravens. But we are getting close to the point where here at Our Lads, I mean, it's what we do, scouting and looking at the draft and getting everybody prepared for that, especially fan bases who their seasons are already over. But taking this an early look ahead at the Ravens, and we talked a little bit about the secondary, what would you think are going to be the needs that let's just say they don't win a championship this year. Let's look ahead and say, okay, why do you think that would have been? What do they need to do to get better?
They need to improve the offensive line, and they need that edge rusher. And they'll probably pick up another corner because they'll need that too, because Brandon Stevens so far this year doesn't look like the answer they thought he was in 2023. So I would say corner, offensive line, and particularly if they lose Ronnie Stanley to free agency. So they'll need offensive linemen, and I think that edge rusher.
Okay. Now they won't need a place kicker now, will they?
Justin has been such a great field goal kicker, and everybody was talking about how he's an instant Hall of Famer right as soon as he retires. And that may be true. He's done a lot in his career, but the ball just doesn't seem to be coming off his foot the same way. I equate it to, because I picked up the game of golf a couple of years ago. When you open your hips up, you pull the ball to the left. That's kind of what he's doing right now when he's kicking, place kicking. And, I think it's something he's got the ability to correct. I saw him this summer during training camp hit a 72-yard field goal.
Wow.
Granted, there was no one really trying to block it or anything.
Sure.
But still, he's got plenty of leg. It's just not coming off his foot the right way. And he made an adjustment. I want to say it was the Steelers game, the first Steelers game. And he pulled a couple to the left, and then he hit one to the right. Hit it really well, but it just was about a yard out to the right of the right upright. And he's just trying to, it's like being at the golf tee and you're trying to figure it out on the fly. Yeah. It's just not seeming to be coming together for him right now. But I think the team is hopeful to to disregard and cut, because there's a lot of people in the fan base that just wanted to have him cut right away.
I know.
And like, you got to be kidding me after all he's done for that team.
Incredible.
And so, and then who are you going to get?
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
you got to really realize that he's one of the most highly paid kickers in the league as well. So there's a negative impact on the salary cap, which they don't really have the room to do. So all those things factor in, of course. But I think they're hopeful that Justin will come through and get back on track. But until he does it, like Lamar in the playoffs, until he does it, no one's going to be happy.
Well, it's again, fan bases, they get spoiled, and they get spoiled for a whole bunch of reasons and positions. And there you go. I mean, they're just spoiled. Tucker's been so great that for any fans to think about, because that's the thing. It's like if you're in another position and you have a bad year, or a year that because the problem is that all of his all of his major, this is where we're going to count on you to make a play. And so this is your opportunity. The spotlight's on you, and nobody else really, they don't care about the snap, the hold, any of that stuff. They just care about, does the kick go in or not? And look, there's pressure to it, but that's what makes kickers like Justin Tucker great, because they can be so consistent, so good for so long. But every player, even great players, can go through slumps sometimes, but they're not in a microscope as much as the kicker.
Right. And his struggles probably alter the way John Harbaugh is going to manage the team in the playoffs.
True.
If there's a 53-yard field goal and it's 4th and 4, and there's some wintry conditions going on, he's probably not going to send Justin out there. In the past, he wouldn't have blinked an eye.
Yeah.
But now, and I think, myself included, when he's out there, you might leave the room, and if you had to go to the bathroom watching a football game, you go to the bathroom, think it's going to be done, right? But even extra points right now, he's clinking off the uprights, and it's, I hope he corrects it, but it's going to alter, I think, the way John's going to manage the team in the playoffs.
And maybe it'll end up as a positive in some way, some crazy way. Maybe they'll make those first downs, right, and it'll turn into touchdowns. So you never know. I guess that's where the karma comes in, and sometimes it's your year and sometimes it's not. Okay, so a couple other things. So doesn't look like, I'm looking at, of course, the Arlad's depth chart and the reserves. These are the guys who are in an injured reserve or other other notifications. But I guess the first question is there anybody, because it doesn't look to be that case, anybody that right now is on injured reserve who is not going to be back that's important to the offense or the defense to winning?
Well, on your chart there, you have Arthur Millette, and he's been nicked up pretty much all year. And I think if he were to come in back onto the active roster, I think that gives them some options and some answers to address the Brandon Stevens problem.
Okay.
Because now Wiggins would get as much or more time at corner. You'd move Marlon out of the slot corner and put him on the edge, and then let Arthur Millette be that slot corner. So I think that would be one of the best ones coming off that reserve. And Charlie Collar has been, good as a third tight end in certain situations. They've been effective in those sub packages with 3 tight ends on the field. So I could see him being a guy that could give them a boost also. But of those on that list, I think Arthur Millette is the guy.
Okay. And speaking of tight ends, do they need because this could be a deep tight end class, and you would think, well, look at that. They got probably one of the deepest 3 tight end in the NFL. But do you think they need like an all around tight end? Is that necessary for their offense or not? That's not necessary.
I don't think it is. If it's one of those things with the Ravens that if one of these tight ends you're mentioning of eligible in the 2025 draft fall to them, and then happens to be the best guy on their board by far, they'll take him. That's just their style. That's been their history. But I don't think they're going to seek a tight end, because Isaiah Likely, they haven't even scratched the surface of what he can do.
Sure.
He's such an athletic guy, and he's becoming a better inline blocker as well. Open field blocker, he's one of the best on the team.
Okay.
He's out there doing, running, because he can run really well, and he's out there leading the way for some of the receivers to help them add some yak yards to, after a catch. So I think they're pretty solid at tight end, and Charlie Collar looks like he could be like a less expensive version of Mark Andrews at some point in time. He's a good player. So I don't think tight end's a position they're going to be looking for, unless as I said, one fell to them that they had highly ranked on the board.
Do you think we've seen like the last? He's not old, but do you think we'll ever get Mark Andrews back to where he was?
I think he's beginning to get there right now. He had a slow start. He got in a car accident during training camp, and the Ravens didn't make much noise about the significance of it, but it seemed to really slow him down early on. But he's getting back to being the Mark Andrews that we know and love, and I think he's on kind of a roll right now with touchdown catch.
Yeah.
I think he's 8th in the season, and Lamar's just spreading the ball around. So it used to be that all he had was Mark Andrews, but now he's got other weapons, and those guys are all getting involved. So I think that in part and the slow start probably has the rest of the country believing that he's slowing down. But I think there's some juice left in the tank.
And speaking of likely, he gets off to such a tremendous start. The signs were there at the end of last season. You knew Andrews was going to get off to a slow start, and then it kind of just all went away.
Yeah.
It's like everybody thought, "Wow, what a season he's going to have! Likely, he's gonna have 15 touchdowns." Was it just one of those things where, well, it was just a matchup that week, and he just happened to play really well, and he almost scored the touchdown against the Chiefs, but then it just seemed like all of that went away, or was it like you said, no, that's just the way it's going to be for now, and he's not at that level yet, and Lamar's just spreading the offense all around, and until he becomes at another level, but he's just not there yet.
Yeah, I think if he was the guy, and because Mark Andrews is still the guy, if Isaiah Likely, if he had to take over that role, I think he'd be just fine. I think he'd be really productive. I think he's going to really be a great pro if he's not already. The thing I think that happens with the Ravens, we mentioned earlier about the offensive line and Lamar Jackson. They breaks containment, gets outside the pocket and ad libs and makes plays. The guys that are the beneficiaries of those plays are the guys that have played with him the longest or know him the best, like Zay Flowers. He's on the same page as Lamar. He'll break off a route when he sees Lamar being flushed out of the pocket. And oftentimes he's the guy that gets that big play down the field because they know each other so well. Rashad Bateman's beginning to get in that same category.
Yeah.
He's presenting himself well when a play breaks down. And Mark Andrews has always had that rapport. So I think that those three guys understand those situations a little bit better than Isaiah Likely does at this point in his career. But I think he'll get there.
I'm going to move out of here, but before I do, I just wanted to bring up Diontae Johnson, especially this week with the Steeler game and everything like that. What's going on there with him?
He's not going to play it down for the Ravens for the rest of the season. And, there are a lot of people that just say, well, why don't they just cut bait? Just let him go. And the Ravens have really not made a statement as to why they haven't done that. I think it was this week, John Harbaugh talked about the numbers and the calculations that Eric DaCosta has made regarding Diontae Johnson. And I can only guess that has to do with the compensatory pick. That if he signs somewhere else, because some people have him as a top 25 free agent when he hits free agency, if he signs somewhere else, and that'll factor into the Ravens with their compensatory pick equation, and that factors in favorably. I don't think they have any intention of putting him on the field. It's either the compensatory pick equation or they just don't want him playing for another contender at this point in
time. Do you know, like from what you've seen, heard, whether or not, like what exactly happened there? Like, is just a player being selfish, or you just don't know?
No, it was publicly announced that he refused to go in a play or in a game against the Eagles. I think Rashad Bateman left the game. Rashad Bateman left the game with a sore knee. They asked Diontae Johnson to go in there, and he said no.
And so we've seen it happen also. Last week with the San Francisco player as well, the linebacker. So I guess that's all we have to know, right? As a fan, right. There's nothing else to it. If you do that and you're public about it, then what else do we need to know, right?
Right. And when you looked at that trade, the Ravens got him for practically nothing. The Carolina Panthers were paying most of his salary. The Ravens paid very little. They swapped 6th and 7th round picks to get him.
Okay.
And they gave away practically nothing. And then they knew that if he performed decently, they'd get a comp pick for him.
Yeah.
But it's just unfolded. And, the price wasn't exorbitant. It was hardly anything. And they've got hardly anything out of him. I think he got one catch or something like that.
I don't know what these players are thinking nowadays when they do this. I just don't. I mean, I don't know if it's they have a bad structure at home with the family, a bad agent, or they're just something wrong with them. But I
Well,
mean,
there's a history with him. I mean, he's done it in Pittsburgh, he's done it in Carolina, and now he's done it in Baltimore.
I mean, if you can't hide it, then there's really little hope for you in the
Right.
league. Now, I'm sure another general manager at some point this offseason will take some sort of a chance, but maybe they won't. Maybe it'll be all right. We'll come in. You come in for a $1 million cheapie deal, and that's all you're going to get. And that's really all he deserves.
Right.
But we'll see. Okay. So rookie class in general looks like it's been pretty productive. What do you think about the rookie class?
I like what Nate Wiggins has done, although I'm on record saying I wanted Cooper DeJean before I wanted Nate Wiggins. I just think he's a more versatile player. But as a pure cover guy, I think that Nate Wiggins might be the better player. So, I'm willing to concede on that one. But he's played well. Roger Rosengarten has played very well, and he's getting better each week. I thought that he was a little bit of a reach in that second round.
Yeah, so did I. Yeah.
I thought that the Ravens just did that for need because they needed someone out there because they let Moses go, Morgan Moses, but he's developed well. You haven't heard his name much, which is a good thing. You don't see T.J. Watt beating him like a drum, like he does a lot of other people, or even when Myles Garrett went up against him, he did a decent job against the best guys in the league. So I expect he's on a good trajectory as for a rookie for sure.
And the rest of the class hasn't played a whole lot?
No,
Okay.
kind of disappointing, really. Some injuries, a couple special teams guys in there. Isaac is a guy I thought that would be much more productive as a rookie. Hasn't seen a lot of snaps because he's been injury plagued.
Yep. Yeah, matter of fact, there's a lot of rookies on the team, even though there's 5 I can see on the practice squad. So, but TJ Tampa too. He's somebody that has just had a lost year.
Yes, he has.
Okay.
And he looked good at times during preseason, so we'll see. I think he'll end up being a pretty good player. The Ravens have a good knack for finding those guys in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round at that safety position and playing well. And there's a few guys around the league that are doing it right now, one of which the Ravens are going to go against against Pittsburgh this week.
Great segue, Tony, because I can't let you leave without the matchup. The Steelers have owned the Ravens, winning 8 out of 9 in 4 straight. They did it earlier this year, and most of them, Pittsburgh was the dog. So Vegas just keeps making the Ravens the favorite in this series. Pittsburgh just keeps going out and beating them. And then what do? They go out and beat them about a month ago, and now they've made the line even bigger for Baltimore, which is just crazy. Now, look, maybe the line goes down when they know for sure Watt's playing. They know for sure that Pickens is playing. It could happen, but it is pretty high. What is it? What is it about the Pittsburgh Steelers that the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson, they just can't beat?
There's a story that went around maybe, 6 or 7 years ago, could be longer, about Mike Tomlin was overheard in the Steelers locker room at halftime, imploring his team to play hard for 4 quarters. And the Ravens had a lead because he said the Ravens don't play 4 quarters. And it's kind of true. The Ravens don't play 4 quarters. They seem to take their foot off the gas pedal. They don't finish games, whether it's offensively or defensively. They just seem to struggle. And I think that whether that's still true or not, the Steelers are in their head. I think Mike Tomlin is certainly in John Harbaugh's head. And they might try a little too hard against the Steelers. Maybe they get a little too emotional, knowing the extent of the rivalry, and the results just haven't been there. You mentioned 8 out of the last 9 games the Steelers have won. I would say that a couple of those losses, the Ravens sort of mailed it in because their position in the playoffs was already
last year
established. Yeah, and there was a few years ago too when RG3 started for the Ravens in place of Lamar. I think it was during the 2019 season. Same kind of thing. So those 2 games, and this will be only the second time that Lamar Jackson has started a game against the Steelers in Baltimore in his career.
He's always been hurt, huh?
Either hurt or they just didn't play him.
They just didn't play him. Okay. That's interesting. How did he do the first time?
Yeah, only one. Oh, I think they lost.
Okay.
Yeah, he hasn't played well against the Steelers, and it's more than just them being in their head and just maybe losing their heads a little bit because they're just over efforting and not keeping their composure because they're so emotional about the game. I think it's more than that, and I think it has to do with the way the Steelers get after the Ravens' offensive line on the interior level, and they do a nice job with Hayward and a couple other guys that they have. And when they do that, it seems to flush Lamar out of the pocket. And because they're familiar with Lamar, those big plays downfield don't seem to happen. And it's just one of those things where the Steelers match up well against the Ravens offense. And so far, the Ravens haven't been able to overcome that. I would say also that last year in Pittsburgh in 2023, they had like 5 drop passes, 4 of which were touchdowns.
Oh, that's not good. No.
I don't think that happens again, but it's those are the kinds of things that seem to happen when the Ravens take over the Steelers.
Yeah, that probably no coincidence that those drops in the end zone happened against the Steelers.
Right.
So that's a great point. Are there going to be any significant injuries of players for the Ravens who may not be able to make it this week?
No, I don't think so. I think that they look pretty healthy at this point in the season. I think that week 14 bye really helped them because they went 13 weeks in a row. And they were able to rest a little bit last week against the Giants because the game was certainly in their control. But Greg, they're going to play 3 games in a matter of 10 days. That's a lot less for any team. And they're playing the Steelers, a physical game. We know that's going to be one, right? And then they play Christmas Day on the road in Houston. That's asking a lot for players, and so much for the league being really concerned about player safety, right?
They care more about that than the onside kick or anything. I mean, come on. It's just whatever. Lastly, Super Bowl. Because hopefully we'll get an opportunity to talk to you before the playoffs, or right at playoff time. But just in case, what do you feel about right now about whether or not this team has what it takes to win a Super Bowl? And if so, how much of a chance? Because you might say, on any given day and all that kind of stuff, they're talented, but just gut feeling, this unit, this team, this season, can they win a Super Bowl? How do you feel about that?
Well, the one thing I think going in their favor is that the league isn't really dominated by one specific team. There's no dominant team. Any of the teams that are playing can be beaten. And so I think that that's going in their favor. And on any given Sunday, the Ravens could put together a game that beats anybody. They have that much talent. But they just lack consistency, Greg. And I think the consistency across the offensive line is the one thing that really is their Achilles heel. Brandon Stevens has been an issue, but not as big an issue as the offensive line at the guard position. So I think because of that, the Ravens are going to have a really good game where they control the football, don't have to, score from behind, and they can, take the air out of the football with Derrick Henry. I think that's the way they can keep winning. But I still think they have to have a balanced offense and they have to have consistency. And until he proves otherwise, Lamar has lacked consistency in the postseason.
Yeah, it's like that Cincinnati game, the one in Baltimore earlier this year. I was watching the first half of that game. You're going, oh, I've seen this before. When the Ravens play like this, they're done. They were doing nothing. Bengals had a 2-score lead, whatever it was. And I went to bed and I recorded it, of course. And I get up and I just fast forwarded a little bit because I just wanted to see if the Bengals were going to blow them out.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it's like Baltimore's leading. So what happened? I had to go back and check everything. It's like but that's how they play.
And then
it's like you don't know.
And then they almost blew it again.
And they almost blew the game again. Yes. Yeah, so, but it's fun. It's exciting. And that's what this is. It's entertainment. So they sure are an entertaining football team. And now let's see if the fans can get another Super Bowl championship out of them. And hopefully we'll get an opportunity to talk on playoff time. But Tony, I appreciate it. We're going to have links in the description of this video for everything regarding Tony and, of course, Russell Street Report. So you can check that out, the podcast, the content, all that stuff, how to find you on social media. So, Tony, it's always great catching up with you.
Always a pleasure, Greg. Thanks for having me.
You got it.